Oh, it's a good volume level. Is that a good volume level? I don't know. Been out of the game too long, baby. Shit. I never can tell. I don't know if anyone's actually watching. Sad as it is to say, but it says it never actually gives me a proper update on the chat, on the viewers. Very frustrating. But that's alright. It's been a frustrating week, quite frankly. Very fucking frustrating. Holy shit. What a fucking awful week. But it's a new week. And it was last week that was terrible. We're in a new week. And it's gonna be great, guys. Oh, is it gonna be good? Don't you know it? Alright, that's all good. Alright, I think we're good to go. Oh! Look at it cracking! Let me just make a note real quick, then we'll dive into things. Alright, here we go. Getting ready. We're burping. We're burping, we're jerking. Well, we're not jerking. But we are burping. Alright, here we go. Good afternoon and welcome to the enemy stream. My name is Andrew Benison. And it's been a while. I've been gone for, I think, almost a week. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. Sorry about that. So let's kick it off with just a little apology. Sorry for missing a few shows. Last week just fucking sucked, basically. Like, it was terrible. I was sick. We had cars breaking down and all sorts of other issues. But we're back with a ton of great updates on the gaming front. The gaming world is going so well. It's going so good. So I've got plenty to talk about today, thank God. Last week was a bit of a drought because of Zelda. If anything was happening, I had no idea because it was just Tears of the Kingdom, Tears of the Kingdom. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about that, because I did promise I'd give an update on how I was feeling about Tears of the Kingdom. So we'll do that just at the beginning, but in terms of coverage today, we'll be going through an update on the PSVR2, I would just call it debacle. Sony saying it's too early to judge the popularity. I mean, this thing's been out for months, but it's early days, and they're very happy with how people feel about it, apparently. Although not many people are really sharing their opinions on it, because only about 300,000 people globally have actually bought one. But hey, they're happy, apparently. So we'll talk a bit about that, and sort of what the direction of VR is going in at the moment based on these developments. We'll also be covering a little bit of an old story. I wanted to cover this last week, but Vampire the Masquerade, Bloodhunt, if that's the correct name. Bloodhunt's dead, or is dying. Undead, you could say. It's not succeeded in the free-to-play Battle Royale sphere. So that is unfortunately closing down, and again ties into this kind of recurring theme that we've been seeing of games coming out. And even if they're successful, like it was in it, relatively speaking, it had good reviews, plenty of people playing it, but it's a free-to-play Battle Royale game, which means you can't just have thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of people playing. You need like millions, and they need to be spending millions daily to keep that thing running. So I want to talk a bit about, less about the game and the quality of the game, and more just about how it came about, and again, what this means for the industry moving forwards, and why I don't believe any lessons will be learned from this experience at all. And then we'll go on to BasedCon. We've got John Carmack coming out last week, and we thought he was based. We thought he was super based, but there's been an update to the story. John Carmack, unfortunately, not as based. He's still a based guy, just not as based as we'd like. He's sort of come out and said, "Hey, this convention I'm going to, I'm a libertarian. I'm one of these do what you want. Whatever happens in the bedroom stays in the bedroom. It's nothing about me, nothing to do with me." He's kind of come out with this sort of libertarian response to why he's attending BaseCon. So we'll talk a bit about that, and again, ties into this recurring theme of how the culture of gaming is on the decline. And if we have any time, I'll talk a bit about Hawken Reborn. Very sad to see Hawken has returned, it's reborn, and we wish it wasn't. We wish it had just stayed dead. Or just stayed in its original form. Instead, I mean, it was essentially killed, right? Like, I think it was 505 bought it. Well, we'll get into it when we get to the news story. But Hawken should have stayed as it was. It was killed, and it's been brought back as a horrible free-to-play chimera. Well, I don't think it's free-to-play, but hyper-monetized monster sort of experience. You know, we're seeing this again and again. Overwatch 2, same deal. Hawken now. Masquerade, Bloodhunt, like all of these games which should be high quality and actually lots of people do like, but they are hampered down or weighed down by the money men, by the spreadsheets, by the need for monetization, at the complete behest of anything to do with like actual good game mechanics or building a quality product. So we'll get into all that and more, but yeah, just want to say at the outset, the Enemy stream is live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. BST, 10 a.m. EST, and you can catch this episode. If you missed it, you can watch a replay on our YouTube, where we also throw up clips. And we're starting to get into more of a content flow on the development side, and I've been saying it for a few weeks, but it's taken a bit of time to figure out what we're doing. But Michael and Jack and I are diving into the fray, producing content, so you can check that out. If you look on our TikTok or in the shorts section of our YouTube, you can see us posting a bit more on the development front of Gun Day and Project Horde and everything else that we're doing. So, with all that said, make sure you check us out. Enemy Team Games. You can find us everywhere. We're all over the internet. We're dominating the sphere. So, let's jump into things here with... Well, we'll start with the Sony story. There we go. Boom. So, Sony says it's too early to judge the PSVR2's popularity, and they will continue... to push forwards. That's good to hear. So, there's no doubt it's an excellent piece of hardware, and it's already host to some outstanding games. Doubt. I don't know about that, but it is an amazing piece of hardware. But it's had a laser-targeted launch, which is aimed specifically at enthusiasts, and speculation is that the headset may not be off to the best possible start. Let's just check this out, but I assume this is in reference to, yes, you know, originally people were saying, look, there's somewhere around 200k units being sold. It's potentially actually closer to 300k. I would still say... overall, as launches go, that's still terrible, right? For something which, yes, is technically a periphery of a console, but essentially has positioned itself as a standalone piece, or it's, you know, you can't play, you know, like Horizon Call of the Mountain. That is a PSVR2 title. Yes, you play it for your PS5, but you cannot play it on your PS5 using the screen. So while it is a periphery, it's essentially a console within a console. And so that, to me, says that, like, hey, if this thing is launching with a couple of 100,000 units being sold globally, and we are now into May, you know, we're coming up on June. This thing came out in, I believe, early February, late February. So, you know, we're 2-3 months in, we're a full quarter in, and maybe we've shifted 300k units. It's not great, and again, I don't say this with any glee. I'm not, you know, not part of this whole console war, like, oh, Sony sucks. But as someone who's working on a VR title right now and has a vested interest in VR working, what's required is like VR platforms launching and coming out are actually good. And I think a huge problem with VR is the fact that you've got to have a high-powered PC and you've got to set up, you know, your headset and weird sensor bars and all this kind of stuff. And the great innovation that things like the PlayStation VR2 brings is like, hey, you just, yeah, you've got the headset and that's it. You just take it out of the box, plug it in, you're good to go. I think that's a massive barrier that prevents a lot of people from getting into VR gaming. And while things like the Quest 2 does the same thing in a sense, that it's just take it out the box and wear it, then the downside, the setback is, hey, this thing doesn't have any processing power, the battery life sucks, so you're basically just playing very, very simple looking, simple experiences that can't really push the boundaries of what VR could potentially do. Okay, so that trade-off to me is also not great. The PlayStation VR 2 is should be like a sea change. It should be like, this is the future of gaming, and that should be what every VR developer, including Enemy Team, is going, hell, fuck yeah, we got to get on this thing immediately. But you look at the sales figures, you look at the kind of lack of momentum and energy that Sony is putting into this thing, and it's not good. And then you see statements like this. So, PlayStation's Jim Ryan, their bigwig, apparently, said PSVR2 has just been launched. Well, again, it's not just, it's been 3 months, but okay, just been launched. So it may be a little early to judge its popularity, but we are happy to see many positive reactions from users and the media. He said as part of a wide-ranging interview, let me just zoom that in for you guys, with Japanese publication Famitsu per Google Translate. I just listed some of the compatible titles, but more than 40 titles have been released around the launch of PSVR2. In addition, there are many titles ahead of us in 2023 and beyond. We will continue to push forwards so that those who purchase PSVR2 can enjoy it for a long time. And we can also secure profits, which would be great. And then this guy goes on to speculate, so we'll just leave him with that. I don't view that as a very positive. That's marketing spin 101. They're not coming out and bragging about sales figures, right? They're not coming out and bragging about massive soaring profits. They're saying, hey, reactions from users, people who have bought it, and people in the media have all said positive things, which is absolutely true, but it's not the whole truth. It's like, I can sit here and say, yeah, as a device, amazing piece of kit, absolutely. And while the price tag is high, I'd say relatively speaking to other VR platforms and the history of the VR experience, much, much cheaper, much, much more cost effective. And yes, it's got a lot of games for it. But that's where you then have to go like one layer deeper and go, what's actually the truth of the matter? And it's that, yes, everybody else has said it's an amazing piece of kit, but they've all also said there's not really that much good content for it, like 40 titles, but how many of those are ports? How many of those are games that we've already played? Or how many of those are experiences like Call of the Mountain, where you play it and you might be wowed by it for a couple of hours, and then that's it. Then the experience is over. A classic problem in VR. And where's the replay value? There isn't really. There's a little bit, but is that enough to justify and keep moving forwards this entire platform, this entire console of its own accord? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so they have to come out and say, hey, well, users are happy. And it's like, well, of course, some of that is going to be a bit of cope and see. There'll be people who love it, but there'll be plenty of people going like, yeah, man, I spent like $1,000 in total buying the fucking hardware and the headset and games, and I'm having so much fun. And it's like, okay, cool. And yes, we all agree the hardware's great, but are these good titles? Not particularly. And they're saying, hey, we've got lots of games ahead. Not really. I mean, if we just take a look, I think we did this on a previous stream, but if we just look at upcoming PSVR2 games, let's just take a quick peruse at... Okay, we'll try this article. I think apparently this was updated very recently, so... I mean, look at this. This is what we've got coming to PSVR2. We've got Hello Neighbor Search and Rescue, Bow plus Arrow Soccer. VR Skater looks cool. Absolutely, that looks awesome. Among Us VR, okay, a port. Beat Saber, okay, another port. Ghostbusters, I don't think we've even seen anything of that. Green Hell, port. Hellsweeper, I believe port. Pixel Rip 1978. I mean, again, love the lady who made it. Very, very talented. Met her a few times, but again, that's a very old VR game in the grand scheme of things. Port. And that's what we've got listed for 2023. That's it! Okay, I'm scrolling into the comments here. I thought we had more of a... Wow, I didn't realize it was that bad. Okay, and there are more PSVR2. Let's be fair, there are more PSVR2 games in development. We know that. But in terms of what we've actually got listed for the rest of the year, which is another 6-7 months at this point, that's not looking great. I mean, would you accept that with any other platform? And again, I guess the response I would expect is people would go, hey, well, VR is more niche. VR is, as this article said, it's a more laser focused launch on the core market. And it's like, okay, fair enough, agreed, but is that not the problem with VR? That it needs to hit that momentum point where it breaches out of just extreme niche, like hardcore VR fans, and starts to attract just average gamers who aren't going to be put off by 4-hour-long games or finicky hardware or long wait times for new content. That's the only way it's the sum of its parts. Like, every element of this has to be working. It has to be great to play out the box. It has to have great content at launch. And then month 1 and month 2 and month 3, And there has to be more people getting involved so that there is a community growing, and so that the multiplayer games have a player base, and there's actually people you can talk to about using the device and being part of that experience. It all works together, like we saw with things like the Wii. The Wii back in the day was a very, very risky ploy. I mean, let alone the name being fucking literal piss. Like, everyone took the piss out of that. But like the actual hardware itself, I mean, they literally sold a GameCube again, but with weird motion controls. Nobody really believed in that up until the point of launch, and no one knew exactly which way it was going to go. Some of us were hyped, but everybody was feeling sussy, I guess. We're going, which direction is this going to go? But it launched with some great first-party content, and it had a slew of third-party content hot on the heels after that. And so all of it came together. You satisfied the hardcore market. We all got Zelda out the gate. But you also had things like Wii Sports out the gate so that the whole family could play. And off of the back of that, basically that's the script that people followed, is either make the hardcore experience that gives you 100, 200 hours of amazing motion control experience, and then the majority went for the more family-orientated, kid-friendly experiences. But it worked, and there was never not something new to play for the years that thing was going for. That's what PSVR2 needs. That's what VR as a whole needs, and we're just not getting it from anywhere. And I don't see, I understand the marketing spin that's coming about through this article. I understand why they need to say things like, hey, positive reactions from users and media, downplaying the problems. But what's the solution here? Again, I said this with I was going to say Jim Sterling, not Jim Sterling. Oh, Xbox chief. What's his name? God damn it. It's not him. What the fuck's the Xbox chief's name called? Phil Spencer. There we go. I was saying this in the Spill Fencer. I was saying this in the Phil Spencer video. That, like, what we really need in response to these disasters is, like, I want to see, like, emperor level, like, dictator level responses from the leaders in industry. I want them to see disasters and be like, this is unacceptable. I want them to be spitting on the floor, spitting in the faces of the people who made bad decisions, picking up a sword, executing some motherfuckers, and getting on with things. And I'm no doubt some of that to a degree is happening behind the scenes, but it'd be great to see some of that energy publicly saying, like, look, this is not okay. Like, hey, we messed up here, or someone's messed up, and I'm coming in to fix the problem. That's what I wanted to hear from Phil Spencer with Redfall, was not saying, hey, sometimes we make 6 out of 10s. It's like, you should never be saying that. Like, yeah, it's true, of course. Like, naturally, you're not going to have a 100% success rate. You're not going to literally have a home run every single swing of the bat. But you don't come out and say, in defense almost, or in response to your latest AAA title being a complete flop and a disappointment on all fronts, you don't come out and go, hey, well, sometimes we shit the bed, guys. What can I say? It's like, no, your job is to be the fucking emperor of Xbox and ensure that this never happens. And if it does happen, it never happens again. And that there are assurances and guarantees that the problem will be fixed. And instead we got the whole, well, we'll look at our processes and we're really sad about this and it doesn't make us feel good in our heart and souls. It's like, I want you killing people. Like, not literally, but as close to as possible. Like, I want you really on the case. And again, same here. What I want to hear from Jim Ryan is not, hey, it's a little too early. We're only a couple of months in, and hey, some people like what we're doing, and boop, ba, ba. It's like, no, I want you to be saying, we're getting the problem sorted, and we're going to invest heavily in content. Like, you should be highlighting, yes, hardware-wise, we've done a fucking bang-up job. We've made, like, the best headset in the market, essentially. In terms of balancing costs, technology advancements, etc. It's like, this thing is out the box, it's great. And in a way that, yes, the Quest 2 is out the box, and to an extent, I wouldn't say great, questionably good. This thing is way better because it's attached to a PS5. Awesome. But the problem is there's not enough content. And you can see it in the comments. I mean, even in this article, just to scroll down a bit, people saying, hey, the price is too high. I don't think that's actually true. I think, if there's content, if the value proposition is there, then the price is not too high at all. It's actually too low if you have content. People saying, hey, hope people support it. Prospect of spending loads of money. This comment keeps coming back up again and again and again. But we were all fine buying everybody was fine buying an Xbox 360 and then another one when it red ringed We all had no problem spending thousands of pounds on continuous Xboxes because there was tons of content. There was amazing games on it. Tech is great. It's not going to take off. Sorry, from Trev666. He's a legend in the gaming industry world. When Trev666 casts his doubts, people listen. But even this no-name anonymous dude has got a great point that it's true. The tech is amazing, and it does have some good content, but it's not enough. And I want to see leadership in games actually grab it by the horns. Do something. Do fucking anything. Stop placating. Stop mush-mouthing sort of, oh, things are kind of, we're reviewing processes and we're looking at things and blah, blah. No. Start killing immediately. Death and destruction raining down from the sky. That's what we need. But anyway, this is a relatively small story, so we'll move on. But it's not good to see. It's not good to see as a VR developer. PlayStation VR2 should be the home of Enemy Team. That's where we should be going with things like Gun Day. We should have 10 games in development. We should be going all in because we really like VR. We think it has huge potential. I have my doubts and misgivings about it, but that's not because of nothing to do with inherently to do with the genre or the medium. It really is to do with how it's being handled. And obviously, we are one business. We're trying everything we can to make the best VR game possible. But what I don't want to be is on a massive shimping sick. I can't get my fucking words right. This is what happens when I don't do a show for a week. I lose the ability to talk, apparently. Holy shit. But no, we don't want to be in a sinking ship. We don't want to be being dragged down by everybody else's failures. And if they are going to commit, and there are going to be failures, there are going to be 6 out of 10s and mistakes, okay, but can anybody own up to this shit? Can anybody stand up and say, hello, we're causing issues, we're fixing the problem, great. That then gives the rest of us, the developers and publishers, the confidence to jump back on board the ship. I mean, this is another issue, is you're not going to have content, even if things are going well, if you don't have people making content, right? You need people to make the games. And right now, there is very little incentive. I would say, not just diminishing incentive, possibly we've already gone past that point to where, unless you're already, neck deep in the VR world, unless your studio is basically entirely geared around that, I couldn't imagine any reason to pivot into VR today in 2023, especially with things like this, especially with all the negative news around Meta and the fact that nobody has any kind of positive feelings towards the trajectory that the Meta Corporation is going. And until we see what Apple is doing with their VR AR hybrid, everyone's just sort of in a holding pattern. And that makes sense financially for many developers and for many publishers, but for consumers, that means what? Yeah, we're 3 months into launch and there's fuck all there to play. So is it going to be in 3 months' time, are all of us going to suddenly produce a load of games for you? Absolutely not. There's a lag time to this. So for every month that goes by where we don't have confidence in PSVR2 or in VR as a whole, that's 6, 12 months, 24 months before you start to see content being produced by those people. It's not good, but there is a Sony event coming on Wednesday, I believe. Let me just check that, which we'll probably do some kind of a reaction to. Yeah, there's the PlayStation Showcase coming on Wednesday, so we'll do a reaction to that. I think that's going to be massively important, right? I think that's going to be hugely important to the future of VR. And I know that sounds kind of crazy to say, hey, this one little event, but it's one of the major columns holding up VR right now. Not doing a great job, but one of the major columns is PSVR2. It's kind of all on Sony at the moment. Meta is just shitting the bed constantly, and there's not really anybody else in the scene. There's Pico and obviously everything that Valve does, but in terms of major players, not just involved with hardware, but in software, Sony's kind of leading the pack right now. So PlayStation Showcase is not going to be VR exclusive, but what they showed there is going to have to really turn some heads. It's going to have to really wow people. Not just for gamers, but for developers and publishers, for the people who actually make the content. We've got to see, yes, Sony is 1,000,000% committed to making this thing work, and that there's going to be, massive profit incentive for us jumping in and taking the risk, bringing our games or creating whole new games for this platform. So we'll do a reaction to that. I don't think it'll be live because Twitch and YouTube, you have all these copyright issues where if it hears 2 seconds of music, you get ass fucked. So we'll probably do we'll react to it and then upload that the next day. But it's going to be very important. Obviously, we'll cover it on the Enemy stream as well. But we'll move on. we'll jump into what's the next story? Of course. Now this is a week old, so I apologize. Hey, I was gone, but we'll cover it anyway. So a month after Andy Chalk discovers Vampire the Masquerade, unfortunately they're killing it. So the Vampire Battle Royale is ending development. The servers will remain online, and it's just such a horrible story. And again, running theme. How many games have we covered just in the past 2 months that we've seen like this? So ever since launch, this is from the developer Shark Mob. Ever since launch, we've been on a journey to excite and delight our players. However, while we have an amazing and very engaged community, we haven't been able to reach the critical mass needed to sustain development, the studio said today. And it's led to the decision to stop further development of Bloodhunt. Good news is that they're going to keep the servers on for as long as they have an active player base and community. Of course, define active player base and community. That could be thousands of people, and that's still, not enough to justify running those servers and incurring costs. So who knows how long this thing will actually be alive for. And it looks like they're changing systems to move away from the kind of free-to-play monetized system to, hey, you can just basically unlock everything through gameplay, which is, of course, what all of us wanted in the first place. None of us want games as a service, live service, battle pass stuff. So it's kind of ironic that the game dying brings about the version of the game that everybody actually wants. Yeah, here we go. They'll make tokens easier to earn through gameplay so players can continue to pick up cosmetics. And it sucks. I agree with this dude. It's horrible because it's part of a long-running IP. It's got a lot of great lore. And, if we jump over to the Steam page, you can see mostly positive reviews. 50,000 reviews, so that's what, going by the 5% rule, that's like 1 million people have probably played this game, potentially more if it's available through things like the Epic Game Store. I don't know, but and you look at reviews down here, and some people have mentioned like, hey, the game's closing down, so this sucks. There's a lot of commentary on like, it's very smooth, great fluid movement, great combat. So we've got a great game here, clearly hampered down by this modern games as a service model. And then you've got to ask yourself, well, why did they do that? Why did they make an amazing game and then essentially kill it with this live service model? And if we take a look, did a little bit of research. If we just jump into the backstory of Shark Mob, so we go here. Tencent acquired the Swedish game studio Shark Mob back in May of 2019. Tencent Holdings said it had acquired the developer Shark Mob for an undisclosed price, and the team includes veterans from The Division and Hitman, so there's a lot of ex-Ubisoft guys, I think, in the leadership that makes up Shark Mob. They founded 2 years prior to that in Malmo, Sweden, where it says an unannounced online game, clearly that ended up being Bloodhunt. And they said when they were acquired, we view the future of online gaming the same way, and Tencent being a leading internet and games platform. There's that word again. We keep covering this on the show repeatedly. The word platform keeps coming up with games. Do you view games as a platform, or do you view games as games? It's a really important question. It seems like a little finicky thing to focus on, but they do, and I've said this before, they really do view games as an oil well, something to literally build a platform on top of. And it's not about what can we give, it's about what can we extract. It used to, the traditional model of making games and products used to be like, I'll make a thing and then I'll sell it to you. And if you want more of that product, if you want different products in the same kind of style, like, we sell more stuff to you. Now it's the reverse. Now it's, we're going to drill into you, this mass of people, in this instance, people who like Vampire Battle Royale games, and then we're going to figure out how can we suck as much out of you as possible, and how can we do that on a regular basis, it's ideally daily, right? Like, not just monthly, not just quarterly where we'll give you some DLC. It's how can we get you to purchase credos, materials, gems, whatever the fucking currency systems are. How can we FOMO the shit out of you so that you keep buying hats and t-shirts and all these other things every single day, until eventually you move on, in which case we do too. We take our platform and we move to the next, Alien Battle Royale, or Wild West Battle Royale, or whatever it is. We don't really give a shit about what the thing is. All we care is that we found a group of people that we can extract from. And I know, I can already see there'll be comments of people going, isn't that not business? That's what all businesses do, right? And it's like, okay, well, why don't we all just, It's tiresome hearing this argument come propping up continuously. It's like, well, why is it that businesses weren't like this in the past, right? Why is the standard not been just rape your consumer base and just make as much money as possible and get out of Dodge? And it's like, because that's actually also not good business, right? Because that creates a bubble. That creates situations where you burn your consumer enough times and then eventually they say, hey, I'm just not buying your shit anymore. And then that applies, to the rest of us. Like, your actions over here as a shitty games developer and publisher affects like my games development and publishing business. So it sort of fucks us all up, right? And so some of us have historically tried to do the best job possible. One, because we're passionate, we actually want to do it. But two, we see that as the sane business decision. Because for us, it's not about making games for a year or two and then getting the fuck out of Dodge with whatever money, with whatever resource we're able to extract. We want to be making games for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, like our entire lifetimes, right? And we care about it, and we want to be custodians in a sense. Like, we're inheriting the world of gaming from the previous generations, the previous legends. It's now our turn to do stuff, and we want to run with it for as long as possible and then hand it to the next lot. But if you are an outsider, if you are a financial entity, let's put it, you view this purely as oil extraction, or like a locust finding a nice field of corn, where the job now is not, from their perspective, their job is not to create a game and create a community and nurture it and grow it and create this beautiful forest, which will continue for eons into the future. No, their job is to suck out everything they can, to wipe the slate clean, make as much, and then move on. Because their vested interest is not gaming. It's whatever makes money, which right this second is gaming. And obviously mega organizations like Tencent have their tendrils into everything from entertainment to technology to, I don't know, probably fucking guns and bombs and shit. Like, they're involved in everything. You see Tencent popping up everywhere. And it's not just them. As we've covered many, many times on the show, the industry is increasingly moving towards this kind of investment class holding company model, where you have, whether it's Tencent or Embracer or these 10,000 other fucking Swedish, like, Nordic entities. For some reason, it's massively concentrated in the Nordic region. All of these mega holding companies that are just buying everything up. And it's not just games, it's other forms of media as well. This is not good because these people view this as just temporary. They don't view this as their careers or their lifestyle. They don't have any passion. It's just, how do we make money off of this? So, going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think it's important to make this point. But it's like, platform, when you see somebody say platform, that immediately tells you they don't give a shit about what they're doing. And that's not to say the people at Sharkmob. Again, I'm on the side of the developers here. There'll be plenty of people, clearly, who are good at what they do and care, because clearly under the hood they made a great game that people do like. The problem is they are at the beck and call, at the complete whims of people who are viewing this as a platform. So this is a couple of years back, if you remember. Support from Tencent's incredible group of games teams will allow us to fully pursue our passions of bringing great gaming experiences to as many players as possible. And, again, if we go back to the page, it's a free-to-play game, so obviously, yes, in a sense, they did meet that requirement. It was brought to as many gamers as possible. But this is not our first time to the rodeo, guys. Like, how many games have we played where we go, this is enjoyable, I'm really liking it, this is awesome, it's a massive game, there's vampires, there's aliens or whatever, and then you get to the currency system, and then you get to the cosmetic system, and then you realize, well, if I'm not engaging with the battle pass, there's no real sense of progression, and I'm just going to be wearing a fucking potato sack, like you do in Darktide. Like, literally, your default character just wears, like, a burlap sack, and if you want anything cool, you gotta pay up, motherfucker. Not good, and that's in a game where you actually have to fucking pay it. You have to buy the game to get access to a system which then goes, hey, give us more money. We've been burnt too many times. And you got to think, well, how many times can we do this? And what effect is this having on gaming as a whole? Because I'm experiencing major burnout from this. Plenty of other gamers are. And I think from a development standpoint, I've not had to particularly experience this. A lot of the work we did in our previous company was outsourced work. So we worked on games like this, but it didn't really affect us. We were getting paid based on the work that we did that day, essentially. But I know from talking to other developers in the industry, from looking at all these news stories of people dropping out, it's becoming just absolutely insufferable isn't the right word. What did American McGee say? He was saying like it's just like unsustainable, undealable, unconscious, unwarranted. It's like that. Like it, you can't as a creative operate in this world where you're being asked to make amazing games and you're following through and doing it, and then the game basically gets cancelled. The game gets shit canned because it's not made hundreds of millions in Q1. It's not had a completely explosive, incredible launch, and so it gets killed. How many times can you go through that? Because this game, based on those news stories there, what was it, 2018, 2019 they were acquired by Tencent. They've been working on it for 2 years. So that's 5, 6, probably 6, 7 years of a good number of people's lives were put into making the best vampire battle royale game to ever exist. They accomplished that goal, and what is their reward? Game gets shut down, and no doubt we'll see people getting let go at some point over the next couple of months. I would have no doubt that this will have an effect on the team size, which, as an interesting point, again, this all relates. So if you go and actually look at the credits to Vampire the Masquerade Bloodhunt, you got 1,500 people involved in making this game. Now, obviously that also includes, like, if you scroll down, you've got testers, you've got voice actors, you've got localizers. You've got people who are obviously not on the payroll like day to day. But it's still, these are all people who needed to be paid. These are all people that, because you have a live service game, and you can see like the credits here for like season 1 production babies. Oh, there you go. Season 1 production babies. Season 1 Shark Mob team, etc. It's like you've got a huge amount of people that have to keep making content. They have to keep expanding the game. That's all massive costs. And so if you release your game for free, then you have to, how are you going to pay for all this? You're talking of a burn rate here in the millions every month, and it will never stop. And if the game's in any way successful, that number will only go up as you need to hire more people in order to make more content, to make more levels, etc., etc. And it's like, right, so that then forces you into a position where no matter how good the game is that you've made, you've got to put in an incredibly aggressive monetization system that is aggressive so that people use it, but isn't so aggressive that it turns people off. And clearly they weren't able to find that perfect Goldilocks zone, if it even exists at this point, in order to make this game work. And you got to think, well, could a team, half the size have made a game half the size or 2/10 the size, but kept those core things that they did really well? This incredibly talented team made a great multiplayer experience with great movement, great combat, but players were really happy with. Had they gone and put $30, $40, $50, $70 price tag on that and released it on a bunch of platforms, would that have likely have done better as a game? Yes. But would that met the needs that Tencent, or, make it kind of agnostic to this situation, any of these kind of major holding companies, what they want is a Fortnite. What they want is that evergreen, it made 100 million, like Fall Guys. Fall Guys made, I think, $250 million dollars of revenue in its like first month or 2 months. It was like an absolutely astronomically insane number. Yeah, it was like within the first quarter of release, it was like $200 million of revenue. And that's what we as developers, as creatives, you look at that and you go, oh, fuck, it's basically just like Takeshi's Castle, but, with weird Eggman. I could have done that. What a great idea. I wish I could have an experience like that. So it inspires you to try and pushes you to be creative and come up with something interesting and entertaining. But you're not looking at that going, I have to now make 200 million in order to justify being in games. That's insane, right? Not for your holding companies, not for your investors, not for your people not for your locusts. Your locusts look at things and go, right, well, there's lots of games, it's this massive growing medium, but we want to make the maximum amount of money possible. And in instances like Tencent or Embracer, these are companies which have colossal amounts of capital. And so they can afford, and we've covered this recently repeatedly with Sony doing the same thing with their, 10 live service games by 2026. Why are they doing that? It's because they only need one of those live service games to blow up like Fortnite, and it covers all of the costs that they've sunk into all of those projects. And then they can kill all of those. If they don't do too good, fuck it, kill them. Fire all the people, disrespect and shit on all the gamers who are trying to build communities, and they go, who gives a shit? Because we've got this one thing that's making us tons of money because we sell hats in it every day, and it's super aggressive, and it's also good. So does that sound like a great future of gaming to you? Like, does this sound reasonable? Does this sound like a good way of doing things? Because to me, from the developer standpoint, hey, what's the proposition? You've got to work at one of these invested in businesses, which sure, you go on the website. Let's just take a look at them. Oh, let's just, sure, you get to work in the nice office with the fancy computers, and they've got the bar, and it's all lovely, and hey, you're looking for an adventure, and we've got all the best tech and everything. But your creative endeavors, your passions have to be infected with hyper monetization and stuff that fundamentally goes against what is best for the game and what is best for the gamer. And so in turn, you will now sink 6 to 7 years of your life into making something that, after a year or two of running, just gets shut down. And then you'll probably get let go. And even if you want to leave, you're going to go end up at another company that's just the same, because this is what the entire industry is moving towards. Does that sound good for developers? Well, no, because at some point they're just going to leave, right? Which is my experience. That's what I'm seeing my friends do. That's what we're seeing people online repeatedly say. So they're just ejecting out of the industry. And it's the most passionate people who are obviously going to go first. Because they give a shit. And there's only so long that you can have your passions and your dreams stamped on and shit upon and wrecked by people who are so clearly just sociopathically in it for the money. You go, there's no point. There's literally, I'm wasting my life doing this. So they all leave, leaving behind a bunch of people who are just glad to be working, just who are also essentially in it for the money. Okay, so now you've lost all the creative people. You have gamers increasingly disenfranchised with any product that they buy. You're just expecting to get fucked. And it's like Darktide, Company of Heroes, this. So many games that have either released in the last couple of months or are being shut down in the past couple of months. Dreams from Media Molecules, been going for years, but hey, just getting shut down, not making enough money. So, boop, dead, gone. Developers leave, gamers unhappy. What precedent does that set? Do you think gamers en masse are going to be like, yes, I'm looking forwards to the next gaming experience. I'm looking forwards to the next thing from Tencent Holdings or Embracer or Sony. Looking forward to my next live service adventure. Of course you're not. Well, does that sound like a positive trajectory for gaming or an incredibly negative one? It sounds like an incredibly negative one. And again, I don't say this gleefully. I'm not happy to see this. I think it's terrible that you've got hundreds of people at Shark Mob who have just wasted, the better half of half a decade on something which is being killed unnecessarily. And it would be great to see, I see the comments, if we just take a look at like the response to the news post actually on their Steam page, tons of people saying the game's really good, it needs more content, this is sad. Maybe, people suggesting maybe you could just make it a battle pass, or maybe you could wrap it up into its own game. Is there not something that you could do? And it's like, of course there's things that they can do. Of course they could do like maybe a relaunch and they could sell it for 30 quid, or they could rejig. There's absolutely a way to salvage this situation. But as I said, like the Sony live service plan, the plan is not to make 10 live service games and have them all be rip-roaring successes, and to ensure that the developers there are well treated and thus are producing amazing gaming content, so the gamers are being well treated. And you have that beautiful feedback loop of all that positivity from the gaming community enriches the developers and pushes them to do more. That's not what they're in it for. They're in it to make money, and that's it. The actual game-making part and having to placate and entertain developers and gamers and consumers, that's all like the annoying shit in their opinion. They view that with contempt, like, oh, for fuck's sake. It's like it's almost like an afterthought, like, oh, yes, of course, bought all these studios. Now we've got to actually, like, treat developers right for a bit and kind of trick them into thinking they're making the game of their dreams. And then there's the gamers that we got to sell to. Fuck. And they always complain about, like, getting financially raped. So, okay, we'll do things like we won't launch with the cosmetic system, the monetization system. We'll put that in 1 month afterwards and sort of trick them. Yes, of course. Ugh. That's how these people view our world. That's how they view our medium. It's terrible. So, of course they could do something to fix the problem if they gave a shit. But they don't. And Tencent obviously has its tendrils in a million pies all over the world, so to them this is just a blip. how can you have great products made when the people calling the shots and the middle managers and the multi-sedimentary layers within that massive empire-sized business, when all the people within that layer, none of them have the incentive to make a great thing. The only people who do are the developers, and they don't even technically have an incentive. I mean, they get paid regardless of the quality of the product, and there's plenty of other places any of us could work at. So they're really being driven. The only people who are actually the only real incentive to make a great game is the personal built-in like self-respect imbued desire to do the best job possible. And that's a tremendous amount of weight to put on a very small number of people within each one of these development studios. There's only a handful of people who really do give a shit. And they're leaving, and this stuff squeezes them out. It's like a cyst with pressure being applied from all sides. At some point it pops, at some point it bursts. And you know, as the old saying goes, once you pop the cyst, you can't scoop it back in. I think that's how the saying goes. But it's true. They're not going to come back once they go. So when people ask why a game's getting worse, it's a very complicated, it's not, I don't think it's something you can say in a sentence. It's a multifaceted problem, but this to me is one of the core drivers of it, is the more we focus on money and the less we focus on passion, the more money-orientated people you get and the less passionate people you get as a consequence. And that can't make good products. And if nobody's in the mix incentivized to make a great game, then what you will get is a series of mid games, which I would call this mid. Yes, it's got, as far as I can tell, people saying great gameplay mechanics, but to some of its parts, okay, combat is good, but it's set in the context of and cannot be removed from hyper monetization. Okay, so that makes it mid. Sorry, it's not a good game in my opinion. It's not worth playing. And clearly, the market feels the same way, or they'd be playing it and buying the hats and taking part in the FOMO events, etc., etc. So it's not a good state of affairs, but I think we've talked enough about Bloodhunt. I've gone on for a while on that. God, we're coming up on 50 minutes. Yeah, we'll move on. We'll keep this rolling. Yeah, we'll move on to this story. Doom co-creator John Carmack is headlining a toxic and proud sci-fi convention that rails against woke propaganda. And this was actually published again last week. I meant to cover this on Friday, but had issues. And initially, what I was going to say on Friday is like, this is the most base shit, like hell yeah. Because I've been talking about this on so many streams that it's like, can a Carmack or a Palmer Lucky or a Notch, can someone step up and start doing things? Can someone start pushing the Overton window in the other direction? The kind of things that I'm saying, important, but I have no relative power. I have no money. I have no reach. I'm trying to build it through the enemy stream and through what we're doing. But really, we need some like heavy hitters. Like, hey, can someone like fund us? Can we get a funder over here who's not like completely shit? Who actually does? Someone who has money, but is more than about the money. As we were just saying, like, I don't want 10 cents money. I don't want a fucking dog shit publisher. Tried all that. Screwed us over with our last business. Can we have people, not, but never say never, but can we work with people who actually give a shit? And can anybody else stand up and say the kind of things that we're saying, which is on everybody's minds? You see plenty of gamers say this stuff, but nobody in industry will, because everyone's scared of reputation loss. Everybody's scared of not being able to get deals. As it's always said, games industry is a very small place. You don't want to say anything out of turn, out of line, or you'll lose everything. You'll lose all opportunities. And it's like, well, I don't want to work with any of you people, basically. I think you're all essentially corrupt and doing a terrible job. And you're all cowards. So I don't want any part of it. So, hey, here I am saying my thing. But we do need people with some heavy-hitting resources. We need people with reach. So I initially saw this, and I didn't read into the story because I was dealing with a bunch of issues on Friday. But I was like, okay, cool. This is exactly what I've been saying literally in the past week. We need people to stand up. John Carmack standing up. Not really. Not really. He's not really standing up. So we'll get into the news story. He heads a list of guests at the upcoming event that bills itself as a sci-fi convention for people tired of woke propaganda. So we'll get into his defense in a second. Yeah, we'll skip that. So he said, original story. He's going to be facing criticism for his recent announcement that he'll be at BaseCon. He's going to be there. Oopa Bappa. And actually, we'll just take a look at the website. Let's just take a look at the website, so it does a better job in this shit article. So BaseCon is an annual science fiction and fantasy convention. How is it different from other conventions, you may ask? Well, sci-fi cons used to be a lot of fun, and hey, you can say the same thing about like game dev con. Like, most conventions used to be fun. There were places where people of all colors and creeds could get together to talk and learn about science fiction, fantasy. But then a few years ago, things changed. They became increasingly dominated by a small clique of authoritarian jerks who made them into venues for pushing social justice dogma, and in the name of inclusiveness, shut down any opinions that didn't align with progressive orthodoxy. You may remember the sad puppy saga. I don't remember that, so I'm just going to skip. I have no idea what he's talking about. Gianna Carano being fired from The Mandalorian because she voiced thoughts outside the acceptable range of opinion. Wasn't that about abortion? Or didn't she say something about vaccines? Some like Holocaust thing? I can't remember. But whatever, I agree with the overall point. Like, hey, freedom of speech is great. We don't have it in this shit country, but America has it. And generally speaking, on the internet, you were free to say what you want. And generally speaking, at conventions, it was to go and find people like you and say crazy shit to them. That's why I originally went to events, and that did change over the past 10 years or so. And undoubtedly, you've heard about... Sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. You can't read what I'm saying. Undoubtedly, you've heard about the push to get critical race theory and other social justice garbage into schools. Each of these controversies starts the same way, and then he goes into the whole, they move in, they make suggestions, then they take over, then they push you out, and it sucks. And it's like, yes, okay, cool. It's been going on for a long time. It's very much a left-leaning phenomenon. Great stuff. And so that's why Based Con has been created. Now, I'm happy that somebody's doing something to push the Overton window in the other direction. I'm happy that somebody is standing up to the woke mob, because it does need to happen. But of course, this is all, it's a bit cringe. Like, Based Con, in internet parlance, based means something like in touch with reality. Based behavior is the opposite of social justice activism, which is about meaningless virtual signaling and beating up strawmen. Some base beliefs include men cannot give birth, a fetus is a human being, socialism has failed everywhere it's been. It's like, this is, again, it's almost like we never left. Did we all die in 2016? And we're just stuck in, is it Groundhog Day, but 2016, and we're just stuck in this loop? Because I'm also, a bit of a tangent, but I'm seeing on TikTok, more protests and events where it's trans people or social justice types, and it's the usual right-wing guy with a microphone saying relatively non-controversial thing, but obviously something that's triggered, and then someone with blue hair, and they've lopped their tits off, and they start screaming, and it's whoa, triggered, and it's oh, what next? Ben Shapiro owns the libs, etc., etc. Are we really still doing this? Most of us use based sort of sarcasm, pretty much all of us using based sarcastically at this point. It's kind of old. We're moving on. We need something that looks to the future. It's not good enough that people stand up and say, hey, shit's gone a little off the rails. Everything's crazy. We are in hell world. Great. We've established that. Can we have something that looks towards the future? Can we have something that's a bit visionary? This does honestly come across as very, based con, and the presentation is very basic. It's not particularly exciting. But hey, John Carmack's going, and that lends some real credence to what's going on, as this article covers. But if we look at his response to this, so did I have this tab up? Yeah, here we go. So obviously people got upset. A lot of people got upset. They saw John Carmack associated with this, and obviously immediately jumped to the conclusion that all the opinions that the creators of BaseCon have, he must have, and that he must hate women and want to, lynch blacks, and the usual gnashing and wailing and grinding of teeth that anything that goes against the orthodoxy is, of course, you're basically just Hitler too. So he's had to jump in and respond, and the response sucks. The response is awful, but here we go. So his comments on BaseCon: it's unfortunate that Rob, the creator of BaseCon, is so intentionally provocative. I told him as much after the event last year. I felt a little uncomfortable. There is a demographic that welcomes the in-your-face posturing, but it drives away sympathetic people that would otherwise be happy to talk about craft, stories, and technology. Even when someone gives you a clear signal, it is a mistake to extrapolate it to an entire constellation of beliefs and behaviors, and then to assume they are contagious by association. That shortchanges a lot of people. I'm not a culture warrior, and I don't want to strike blows against anyone. I don't follow activists on either side, including Rob, because I tend to think that all the negativity and resentment is detrimental to both the author and the target. And then he goes on for ages about backstory. And, I thought one interesting point here was, where does he say it? It was somewhere in here. Tiny niche. Maybe he said it in another sec. There we go. I like hard science fiction stories with a bit of a competent libertarian vibe. Honestly, that's everything that comes across here. Like, the people setting up BaseCon, what John Carmack's saying, and it is disappointing. I have a lot of respect for the guy. Obviously, he's done amazing work. He's like a, pillar of the industry is an understatement. But after the letter that he posted, him leaving Meta and talking about the problems there, I would have hoped he would be a little bit more woke on what the problem is and a bit more willing to be a culture warrior. Because the reason things are getting worse in part are because of culture warriors. They happen to fight on a different side to me. They happen to hold different opinions and beliefs to actually most normal people. But they are fighting. They are culture warriors. And they are successfully shifting culture and thus everything within culture, including games, in the direction that they want it to move in. Which is not the direction that the average gamer wants, but it's moving in that direction regardless because no one's willing to stand up and be a culture warrior on the other side. No one's willing to stand up and be intentionally provocative and what's the phrase, to be posturing, to be aggressive in any means. And it's like, but is that not what is required in order to shift things back in the other direction or to shift things in a positive, non-destructive direction, let's put it? Because all of this activism, all of this culture warrior shit is critical, critical race theory, critical, whatever you want to call it. It's about tearing things down. It's about looking at the world as it is and criticizing everything and saying, well, everything's bad and thus needs to be destroyed, with very little to actually replace it. And what is suggested as the replacement, what is suggested as, this is new Coke, this is better. It's like, yeah, it's new Coke, it sucks, it's not good. We're experiencing this now across our entire culture, whether it's entertainment or how our governments are run. Like, nothing is going in a good direction. And it's a direct consequence of this side of people, if you want to call them the woke mob. It's not what they are, but for the purposes of continuing on YouTube and Twitch, we'll just say that these people are winning because they are fighting. And as I keep saying, we need people to stand up and actually fight for truth, fight for honesty, fight for something. Like, even just nebulous, like, fight for, like, the right to make a first-person shooter or something. Like, fight for fucking anything. But it's always this libertarian response of, well, I don't want to, if you take a position, then some people won't like that. And that's restrictive. That's not good. And thus, we need to be libertarian in our approach of what happens in your bedroom, buddy, stays in your bedroom. That's fine. If I want to smoke weed and shoot my gun on my land, I can do whatever I like. My actions and beliefs have no effect on anybody anywhere. And it's like, not to be the we live in a society guy, but it's like, but we do. Societies are made up of individuals carrying out individual actions that make up the sum of the society. And obviously, if a group of people start acting and behaving in a certain way, it will start to affect the rest of us. If certain forms of media are produced that push certain messages, that affects the rest of us, right? And so at some point, if you don't like how things are going, if you leave Meta because it's completely incapable of making products, or other people just leaving the industry as a whole because they say this whole environment is just non-conducive to making good games. If you are sick of bad games, bad TV shows, bad movies that are weighed down with all of these awful storylines and mechanics, everything, all of it, then it stands to reason that you can't then just sit there and go, well, I'm not going to take a hard stance on anything, but I would like to have like an open conversation and a dialogue. It's like, dude, we've tried that. We've been trying that for years. I've tried that for years. I've tried to be open and understanding and empathetic and restrict and limit what I say as to not offend others in the conversation. I mean, that's been my entire experience with the games industry, is it really is a bunch of people who are incredibly sensitive to anything that goes against the status quo, anything that goes against orthodoxy. It's incredibly draining, and it's like, the only way things are going to get better is if people actually say what they believe, and those things are going to be controversial, and they're going to be offensive, and they're going to be disruptive. And, in the case of, in this country, in some instances, like, straight up illegal. Like, there are opinions that I have that I know could be construed as, like, straight up, like, hate crimes at this point. Like, hate speech. Which is why these rules exist. It's exactly to stifle and stop people like me saying what we actually genuinely, honestly believe. It's not about being provocative for the sake of being provocative. It's not about, I mean, I'm a contrarian, but, you know, mostly because I just view the world differently. I don't hear somebody say something, or I don't see a product and go, well, I'm going to do the complete reverse of it for no apparent reason, just for the sake of it. No, I just happen to have a different position and stance on things. But it's not good enough to continue with this like libertarian cope that we can all just get along, and you can keep doing things your way and we'll do things our way, and it's a live and let live situation. Because one side is not like that. The libertarian side, if you want to call it that, is like that and go, anybody can do, everyone is friends with everybody. Everybody can do whatever they like. And the other side is like, we will kill you for disagreeing with us. We will get you blacklisted. We will get you kicked out of the industry. You will not be able to work in the industry. You will not get funding. This is shit that I've experienced before I started doing all this. And it's stuff that I saw throughout the industry. People very scared to step out of line because it's a small industry, Andrew. People talk. You're going to want to fit in. You're going to want to do what the people at the top are telling you to do. Very normal. And it's happening across... This is not exclusive to games. This is across our entire culture. This is in every form of media. This is in every institute, every corporation. Everyone is being affected by this. So this point doesn't just apply to us gamers. Games developers, it really does apply to like everybody at this point. We do have to actually stand up and say what we believe in. And so I really hope to bring it all back round, because we are now hitting an hour and 5 minutes. Jesus. To bring it all back round, I really hoped, as kind of cringe as the presentation of this event is, and it's not particularly to do with gaming, it's more of a sci-fi convention, you know, overlaps a bit. I was hoping, hey, John's involvement, he'd actually stand up and say, maybe not fall in line with all of the opinions and everything here, and maybe not be as provocative, but to actually start talking openly and honestly about what he believes and about how we need to start carving out and creating a different pathway for this industry. And ideally bring a lot of people along with us. Instead, he comes up with this, hey, you know, I'm not a culture warrior. I don't want to strike blows against anyone. Well, then, welcome to the club. That's what everybody else is doing. We are being dictated to and run by an incredibly small group of people who harness an incredibly large amount of power. Not just through their control of businesses, but also funding, publishing vehicles, etc., etc., and inroads into like the journalist side of things. I mean, not to get too gamergatey, we've covered that on a few shows in the past. Like, that's all still real and happening. There is a cabal. Everybody in that world talks and communicates and ensures certain things are said, certain people are promoted, and certain people are never promoted. This is not new stuff. I always feel like I kind of feel stupid for even having to say it at this point, but it bears repeating because so many people either are not aware this is happening somehow, or they just forget and they go, well, the world can't be that bad. And it's like, it really is. And so if you're not willing to strike blows against anyone, we're not talking about violence here. We're talking about like actually standing up for yourself and standing up for what you believe in. If you're not willing to strike that blow, then nothing's going to get better. Everything's going to continue to get worse. People are going to... I mean, he's at BasedCon, I assume, as he said, because... What was it? He likes hard science fiction stories. He likes being able to organize events and talk to people who are more in his mindset. I mean, he's not even really said anything that strong, really, but he wants to see these kinds of products. He wants to talk with people who are a bit more, let's say, open-minded or differently minded. Okay, well, you're not going to get that unless you stand up and say something and do something and support people. This is simple shit. And nobody's doing it. Everyone's choosing the easy route. Everyone's either leaving the industry or choosing to not say anything. Continuing to remain silent. After everything we've been through, not just in the world of gaming, but the whole COVID fucking thing. Absolutely insane. Elections and all sorts, and that's all coming back around. We're all about to deal with it all over again, and it's going to have massive impacts on our culture and our society and global culture. It's time for people to start saying what they believe. It's time for us to maybe not all go to BasedCon, but be in that based spirit, right? To start doing things like that. It's what we're doing at Enemy Team, at least. You know, we founded this business and we gave it the name that it has So we're like, we do want to stand in defiance. We do want to be a known entity. We don't just want to blend in like we did with Prospect, where we're just, hey, you know, we don't want to rock the... We literally would tell people that we don't want to rock the boat. We just want to make fun games. Not good enough, because you've got to play the whole game. You've got to come out and talk about how we need to hire more women and we need to have racial quotas and this, that, and we need to have more of these kind of storylines in games, and we need to call gamers toxic at every turn. Like, if you don't do everything these people are telling you to do, then they just view you as the enemy anyway. Hence, enemy team. We went, well, we don't believe in that shit. We don't like any of that. We were willing to be libertarian and live and let live, but it didn't work. They killed us anyway. So... please, John, like, maybe he's too old a dude. I mean, he's done his time. Maybe it's unfair to put it on this guy's shoulders, but we do need other people to start, I don't know, at the very least talking. I'm not saying give us loads of money. You don't have to set up some massive, you know, I'm not saying you've got to build an entire empire overnight, but we do need people to actually say what they believe. And to say... this very aggressive mob of people, yeah, we're going to have to actually, like, strike blows with them. And again, not talking about physical assault. Don't condone that. Violence is never the answer, ever, apparently. But in the context of making games, and in the context of kind of gamer culture and kind of overall, like, sci-fi nerd culture in this case, we do need to start pushing back. So... sad to see, but BaseCon, interesting. As I've mentioned on previous shows, my first business was a gaming events company, which was very, you know, it was open to everybody, and people enjoyed it. I did a few events, and I've got a knack for it. I'm actually pretty good at it. So I've had a sort of growing desire of, like, trying to do a gaming event, something like you would have seen, like, the old school Rezzed events back here in the UK, back when it was more smaller, more intimate, more actually focused on, like, passionate games creators, not like massive AAA entities. And so, but something that also then starts to address the cultural issues taking place in our society and within games in particular. Somebody, you know, an event where people can actually address the problem of, like, why do most gamers think gaming is getting worse? What's the deal with all these holding companies? Like, why do we keep pushing for, like, more women and more BAME people being hired? Like, how is that a through line to making better products? Like, an event where people can actually talk about that and not be scared of having their lives destroyed or being completely silenced and shut up in the first place, that sounds very appealing to me. Because if we can get some like-minded people in the room, we can start to come up with solutions and not just complain about the problem, which is, yeah, what we do here. We do complain quite a bit, but I do try to offer solutions, and we are actively working on games as well to address this problem. Like, we look at gaps in the market. We look at games, you know, like Project Horde. We look at Back 4 Blood and go, that was a fucking abortion of a Left 4 Dead spiritual sequel. Let's have a crack at it. We're very passionate Left 4 Dead fans. It's one of the reasons I got into making games in the first place. That's the kind of impetus, is can we deliver that fast-paced zombie-slaying game that builds upon the formula of Left 4 Dead? Can we build that? And we're in the early stages, but I think we're very much heading in that direction. So we are putting our money where our mouth is, but we do also need to talk about the issues. And if we can get some people in the room, we can start to build a vision of the future. Not just saying, what are the problems of today? And not saying, hey, things were great in the past, maybe we can go back to that. Let's just go back to the 90s. Let's go back to the noughties. It's like, that's not possible. Nor should we want to do that, because that's the past. It happened. A specific set of events took place that created that world. Well, that's all gone. That world is gone and those events transpired. We need to figure out how to build something into the future. And it'd be great if Carmack and Lucky and others, people with access to audiences and, more importantly, in a sense, money, could get involved, because that will speed the whole process up. But we got to start grassroots. We got to start somewhere. And maybe along the way we can get a Carmack or somebody on board. But we'll move on. Talked about this quite a bit. I mean, we're at 1 hour 12. I'll wrap it up with... We'll talk a little bit about Hawken. We'll talk a little bit about Hawken, guys. Just one sec. Oh, it's such a hot day as well. I'm sweating. Throat's so dry. I've been out for like all weekend. I was out painting fences as well. So I'm just like, I'm burnt inside and out. I'm dying over here, but I'm doing this for you. So Hawken Reborn isn't a comeback for the brilliant mech FPS. It's a total disaster. So for those of you who don't know, Hawken was a mech game that came out 10 years ago at this point. Holy shit. I was a big Hawken head. I was disappointed with the game at launch, not gonna lie. A lot of people very fond memories of Hawken, and it was an important major step in the sort of indie golden age, whatever you want to call it. It was sort of like, hey, here's this like AAA looking game coming from, a couple of dudes essentially, relatively speaking. It wasn't made by a massive studio, but it looked like something that could compete with the AAA at the time. It showed that like, hey, small teams can now compete. It was a important milestone in the development of gaming. But 505 acquired it at some point and then shut the whole thing down, and that sucks. But hey, now it's back. Except it really isn't, because they've taken the corpse of that fantastic PvP mech game, which died well before its time, and turned it into an ugly PvE game. And that's an important point. This game does... That was another thing. Hawken looked fucking amazing. For the fact that it was coming from an indie team or a smaller team. And also, we're talking like, I think it was, when it was announced, it was like 2010 or 2009. It was like it was early, long time ago. It looked incredible. You just have to look at screenshots and videos of this, and it's just like, ugh. It's like generic, like mobile game, like what the hell? So yeah, the impeccable art, sound, and design and the lumbering feeling of the mechs all played a big role in the original Hawken, but that's all gone. It's all dead. The early access version has been changed to a PvE game and features 6 story missions, open-ended patrol. It's hideous, it's a cluttered mess, with a cursed art style that makes everything look like dirt. I've seen many people, I've not played the game, I've not looked much into it, I watched some videos, I've seen many people saying that the art, like character art and like the writing, looks like it's AI written, essentially, like they've had ChatGPT spit this stuff out, which is like hilarious. What a cheap, awful thing. And again, we could really get into this, maybe I should have saved this for the next stream, but immediately it's like, okay, so if they're not buying up studios, or if they're not building studios from the ground up in order to make these live service type games, what do we see these major publishers doing? We see them acquiring IPs, we see them killing those games, and then we see them bring them back years later as like an absolute Frankensteinian mess with monetization systems built in. They're cutting corners. Hey, do we hire writers? Do we hire character artists? Fuck it, we'll just have AI generate it. Absolutely just the most like locust form of making games you could ever imagine, right? It's terrible. Has no visual identity. Piloting your mech feels deeply unpleasant. In fact, yeah, if I just bring up... Oh, I had some gameplay before. Oh, it's loud. Yeah, I mean, if you just look at like the movement, I mean, this trailer's kind of spazzy. But it looks like sickening. Come on, get to the gameplay. Mostly negative, by the way. Like, wow. A lot of people jumped on board to say it's terrible. I mean, look at that. It's just... I mean, it looks like puke. But yeah, just sort of a nauseous movement, like the way that the cockpit kind of wobbles around. It just doesn't look like anybody played it and gave a shit. And as this guy says, the hypnotic motion of the cockpit has been replaced by a metal prism where everything wobbles and spasms. Mouse sensitivity does nothing to fix the problem. So again, it's just like, it's almost like nobody put any effort into this. This guy's got nothing good to say. The reviews are abysmal. And if you fell for the original, there's not much to keep your interest here. So again, it's sort of preying on your desires from the past. What you liked about the past. And corrupting it entirely. And probably the most egregious offensive thing is the fact that this is launched with a cash shop. Which if I just go check out the reviews, I did see some people talk... Just Control F, cash. Yeah, clear cash grab, mobile style. Somebody was saying in one of these that, like, there's multiple currencies. Yeah, so game is stingy with its resources, attempting to push you to spend money in the cash shop. And there are multiple currencies that you got to buy, and there's like crafting and all that kind of just usual, just boring shit that's like absolute pseudo gameplay. I mean, I think I shouldn't go too much more. I think I could talk about this for an hour, but it just fits into the repeating pattern that we're seeing. It doesn't matter if it's a new IP, it doesn't matter if it's an IP reborn, it doesn't matter if it's a sequel. Everything is being steadily corrupted by this class of people who are just platform-based. Just trying to extract as much resource as possible, as quickly as possible. And they will do stuff that, again, no doubt, I don't know what the team is, who the specific people. It says 505 Games as the developer. I don't know who the people are who have worked on this. No doubt their intention was to make a good game. I'm rarely against the developers in any of these stories because we give a shit. And without us, you don't have a game. But what was my point? It just dropped out of my head. Yeah, I don't hate the developers. What I don't like is that decisions are being made where like any developer worth their salt knows that you can't launch an early access game with a monetization system built in. But that is turbo gub like suicidal fucking mental case thinking. Anybody would know that. Ask any gamer. You don't even need to. You don't have to have a degree in making games. You don't even have to know how to make games. Just ask any gamer. Like, hey, do you think it's appropriate to launch an unfinished game into early access, which is hyper monetized from the get go? Any one of them would say, not only is that not appropriate, but just say it sucks. Like, I wouldn't jump into an experience like that. I just wouldn't trust it. I would fully expect. Not only am I gonna have to grind tremendous amounts in order to get a handful of items which somebody else will just pay for, but that will then evolve into a sort of pay to win or just straight up pay to play experience. That comes with diminishing returns. Hey, you may have been able to fool me back in like 2013 when this trend started. They actually didn't fool me. I didn't fall for any of this shit at any point. Always hated this, but plenty of people have fell for it numerous times. But in the year of our Lord 2023, you're telling me that Hawken has launched as like a PvE free-to-play, like, monetized, like, complete piece of... Is it free-to-play, actually? Yeah, free-to-play, monetized piece of shit. Like, of course you're not going to trick me. So, you know, it's the same story again and again. You've got developers trying to do their best, no doubt, with people on top who are just going, can we screw people out of their cash? And if Hawken doesn't go right, I mean, 505... I don't know too much about them. I know there's a lot of shady business practices. I've talked to them a few times at events, like members of 505. Never had very good experiences. But, you know, they are a very, very large publisher who owns, you know, they own the rights to everything from Death Stranding all the way down to Serial Cleaner's Dino Park and Grow Song of the Evertree. So their incentive for making an incredible experience in the in the realm of like Hawken is pretty low. Oh, and they're behind Crime Boss as well. That fucking awful like Payday. I never got a chance to talk about that. I'm gonna have to do an episode or something on that. I'm gonna have to go play it because what an offensive piece of shit. So that's 505 for you, and it's like, yeah, clearly they don't have an incentive for making incredible games because they have things like Control, they have things like Death Stranding. They have amazing titles by very creative outfits. So, hey, they can afford to just try their luck, push a button, push your buttons as a gamer with something like Hawken and say, hey, well, yeah, we'll throw this thing out there. And we'll try it with hyper-rapey monetization. Maybe we'll trick people on the nostalgia bait of the Hawken name. And maybe we'll get people on the, you know, co-op side of things. People are looking for more co-op type games. And if it doesn't work, who gives a shit? Hawken wasn't making any money for years anyway. We already killed it. So it's ours to do with as we please. And I know there'll be a lot of people, a lot of shill types will come out and say, well, that's just the nature of business. That's just how it goes. And it's like, fair enough, okay. But does that mean we should be accepting of that and happy with that? You know, yes, that's going to happen. Like the 6 out of 10 argument. Yes, there's going to be bad games, there's going to be bad companies, etc., etc. But this is not an isolated incident, guys. This is happening everywhere. This is coming from 505, it's coming from Sony, it's coming from Tencent. It's coming from all angles of the industry. This is not a good situation to be in. So I think I should wrap it up there because I like I said, I could go on about this for a while longer. We have actually had some comments in chat as well, which I should probably have responded to. I should probably get super chat set up so that I can make money off of these comments. But appreciate you guys dropping comments into the mix. How to wrap this up in a positive way. I hate wrapping this up with black pills. I guess the running theme here is the running theme here across like, yeah, Shark Mob, John Carmack, Hawken is people just accepting things for the way that they are instead of striving and standing up for how things should be. There's the running theme. I'm kind of bolting that together a bit. But it's like we are, as an industry, we have essentially just accepted that this is the way things are. that if you want a future in the industry, this will be the advice anybody's being given today. If they're looking to get a career in games or advance their careers, it's you want to find one of these large studios, one of these large publishers. You want to be on one of these live service projects for the next couple of years. And, you know, when they start doing goofy shit with the narrative, when the writing's terrible, when the characters are boring, when it's all wokeified, etc., just don't say anything. When the spreadsheet people are making decisions for you, which are going to absolutely destroy the game and rape the gamer, don't say anything. Just go along with it and make whatever money you can. That's the vision of the games industry. If we're gonna, which is, I'm not trying to, no, that's a super black pill. That's the current vision of the games industry. And that's not good, but we are addressing it, we are highlighting it, we are critiquing it, and we at Enemy Team, at the very least, in the products that we're making and the content that we're producing, we are trying to go in the opposite direction. And we hope that there are other people out there. As cringe as things like BaseCon are, we do need more stuff like that. We do need more people standing up, and we need more creatives also willing to not take the publisher money, to not, like as Shark Mob did, to not have a Chinese super conglomerate come in and essentially take over the operation. We need Carmacks with their, millions to however many hundreds of millions they may have to start maybe investing in people who actually do give a shit about what they're producing. We need that to start to come together in a cohesive vision for the future of gaming, and for other mediums as well. So, hey, if you're in films, if you're in comics, like, hey, this is not an isolated problem. We need a sort of culture-wide thing going on here. But in our neck of the woods with games, that's what we're trying to do here with Enemy Team. We're trying to paint a positive vision of the future. And at whatever stage we're able to get to the point where we can start running events, or we can start supporting other studios, we can start investing in them. If we could start publishing other games, absolutely. Those are areas that I want to aggressively move into, because the advantage that we have is that we do give a shit. And at the end of the day, you can put together your fancy trailers, you can have your showcases and your giant summer games fests and all the press and all journalists saying, hey, this thing's amazing. But there's only so much you can trick gamers, and there's, it's now, we're really breaching into the mainstream of kind of communication here, where you see just the average person just saying like, yeah, games sucks. Well, what's the solution to that? Make great games which don't screw the gamer over, that respects their time, respects their energies, and gives them something which is going to fulfill them, which is going to make them feel good, and that it's in some way additive. It adds to their life, and it's also a product, or it's an experience that we as the developer publisher can add to as well. Because that's going to make them feel positive about the future. That's going to want to make them want to buy our products, be parts of our communities, etc., etc. That's what we need moving forward. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up because we're at an hour 30 now. So you've been watching the Enemy stream. We are live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. BST, 10 a.m. EST, except for when like I'm ill or a car is breaking down, in which case there's no show. But generally speaking, we're here Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We are also ramping up the content that we're putting out on TikTok and YouTube. You can see development of our VR game Gun Day and our zombie game Project Horde, along with our other kind of experimental titles like Oppressor, putting more and more stuff out there. So make sure you check all that out. And we will be back on Wednesday, maybe with... No, because, yeah, we'll be back on Wednesday to cover the news, and then we might do a live stream on Wednesday night for the actual PlayStation showcase, whatever it's called. I'm not sure. I have to look into that because we've got copyright issues. But we will be back Wednesday with the Enemy stream. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you then. Good morning, Jaded Zodiac. And good night.